Tonight on Joy News Prime, stay off pension funds or incur the wrath of workers. That's the warning from Clocksack's government. Also this evening, President Akufo-Addo Shaw has a response to workers. Details from the Labour Day celebrations in Bolgatanga as Labour experts warns Labour will be tough on politicians in demanding fair treatment on the Labour front in the next elections. Also this evening, converts the National Cathedral into a national hospital. TUC tells government, insisting it has no priority and must be discontinued. My name is Ayisha Ibrahim. We're coming to you live from our studios in Kokomlemle. We're on DTT because we're free to air on DSTV channel 421 and Go TV channel 144. We are your home of independent, fearless and credible journalism. Do stay for details. Members of the Civil and Local Government Staff Association Ghana, Clocksack, has issued a stern warning to government to stay clear of their pension funds, else incur the wrath of workers. The Finance Minister last month hinted at attempts to include some pension funds in the domestic debt restructuring program, but addressing members of Clocksack to mark May Day celebration here in Accra, Deputy Executive Secretary Kojo Krakani says workers will never allow their pension to be included in the debt exchange program.
Arrangements are being threatened, even though the contributory three-tier pension scheme has begun to yield positive results. It is very relevant and significant to maintain the existing pension structure. Clocksack is sending a warning signal to all forces, both visible and invisible, steer clear of current pension arrangements as enshrined in the National Pension Act 2008 Act 766. He who has ears, let him hear this message. Clocksack is sending a warning signal to all forces, both visible and invisible, to steer clear current pension arrangement as enshrined in the National Pensions Act 2008 at 766. He who has ears, let him hear this message. The outcry of public sector workers, especially teachers and civil servants, during the beginning of the 21st century, be reverted onto government pension under either Cap 30, that is 1951, or the Teachers' Pension Fund 1952, led to the setting up of the Presidential Commission on Pensions in 2004, chaired by Dr. T.A. Bediako of blessed memory. The Presidential Commission on Pensions was tasked to ascertain whether the observation by workers that captated paid better lump sum or gratuity and monthly pension than Senate was accurate. Also to see whether all public sector workers could be placed on Cap 30. If not, they should propose a sustainable pension scheme. The Commission made profound findings and noted that, 1, workers generally believe that pension earnings were the responsibility of the employer only. Government. Another finding, best practices all over the world showed that pension is a shared responsibility, and thus the worker and employer ought to contribute towards an employee's pension in a fully funded scheme. The Commission also found that Cap 30 was not sustainable because it was not funded. They went on. Surprisingly, responsibilities of a worker, the Commission found this one too. The responsibility of a worker do not diminish while on retirement.
Northeast Regional Capital Nalerigo members of Clocksack, as part of their activities, joined calls for existing pension structure to be For the existing pensions to be maintained in the face of the economic crisis, the Regional Association supports demands for the restructuring of SNET and all other recommendations of the Presidential Commission and government's white paper on the management of workers' pensions. Eliasu Tanko has more.
At the forecourt of the Regional Coordinating Directorate, members of the association celebrated the day with a brandishing of placards calling for better working conditions for public sector workers, in particular regarding the controversy surrounding the management of pensions. Regional Secretary Idrisu Fuseni read a statement on behalf of the group.
At this point in time, where the country has been thrown into a crisis to the extent that pension arrangements are being threatened, CLOSA is sending a warning signal to all forces, both visible and invisible, to stay clear of current pension arrangement as enshrined in the National Pension Act 208 Act 766. He who has ears, let him hear this message.
The association appealed to SNET to transfer all past credits of their members within the public sector to their respective schemes as directed by the National Labour Commission in 2020. CLOSAC in the region also called for the implementation of all the recommendations of the Presidential Commission and the government white paper on pensions management.
Several years have gone by, but no attempt has been made to comply with the recommendations. SNET needs to be restructured. Now is the time. Action now. No more delay. Workers, arise and protect your future. On this May Day, we salute the Bediako Committee which brought us at 766. We resolve to resist and fight any force that will attempt to tamper with the National Pension Act 208 Act 66.
The association used the opportunity to present citation to some of its members in the region who have distinguished themselves at their various workplaces.
He currently works as the head of the budget unit, New National District Assembly. And I read from the citation, Civil and Local Government Staff Association Ghana, CLOSA, presents this 2023 Regional May Day Award to Mr. Ayo Cletus Akonvare for your invaluable contribution to the activities of the association in the Northeast region, duly signed by the Executive Secretary.
Mr. Ayo Cletus Akonvare thanked the association for the recognition and encouraged public sector workers to accept postings to rural regions of the country.
Some people, when they find themselves within here, the Northeast, I think it's the most deprived region in the country so far. A lot of people have been posted here. They refuse to accept posting here. So my advice is that wherever your service is needed and you are posted there, accept it. Especially when you find yourself here, you should feel free. It's part of Ghana, so that when we work together, at least one day, the region can also become like one of the devolved regions in the country, and we'll all be happy.
Well, the Trade Union Congress has called on government to convert the National Cathedral into a national hospital, insisting the project cannot pass for a priority and should be discontinued. The cathedral, a pet project of President Akufo-Addo, has embroiled in controversy over cost and relevance. Addressing workers to mark May Day celebration in the Upper East region, Secretary General of TUC, Alban, said the current economic crisis of the country does not support the construction of such an edifice.
The reason Ghana has had to seek IMF support almost every 3 years is largely due to the flaws in the way our economy has been managed based on the neoliberal free market ideology. We would like to reiterate our well-known position that the IMF program can never take us out of this crisis. Our history of engagements with the IMF provides ample evidence that IMF-sponsored programs and policies cannot change our economic circumstances. Another IMF program will only impose more economic burden on us. We have to change the situation ourselves as Ghanaians. We believe strongly that government can lead us out of this crisis. And the government can do so by cutting expenditure on non-essentials, including the need to stop spending our hard-earned revenue on a national cathedral. Let me say this again. We believe that government can lead us out of this crisis by cutting all non-essential expenditures, including the need to stop spending our hard-earned revenue on a national cathedral. I'm sure the president will have something to say about this. The president has always said he wants to create another Notre Dame in Ghana so he can attract a lot of visitors. But we disagree. In fact, comrades, it will be better to convert the project into a national hospital. Mr. President, you can also reduce the size of your government. Ghana has too many ministers and deputy ministers. Chobin, revenue mobilization. We acknowledge the efforts government is making, but those efforts must be intensified.
TUC is also warning workers may be forced to demand salary increments if inflation is not tamed. Secretary General Yalban says they will not accept any increase in salary and emoluments of members of Article 71 office holders.
The first thing we want to do, if we really mean to protect incomes, is to protect jobs. We need to protect the jobs that afford workers the opportunity to earn regular incomes. Too many workers are losing their jobs in Ghana because some employers are abusing their rights to hire and fire. Other employers are also taking advantage of the weaknesses in our labor law and replacing permanent employment contracts with fixed-term employment contracts. In the last 5 years, TUC alone has lost thousands of its members due to this practice, which is being promoted and facilitated by private employment agencies. That is why we have been pushing for the review of the national labor law to protect jobs and to protect incomes. Mr. President, once again, we would like to appeal to you to ensure that the labor law review is completed this year. This is very important. We have been appealing for a very, very long time, but we are very unhappy about the slow pace at which the labor law reform is going. If nothing is done, we are afraid that you will leave office and we will not get the labor law. We appreciate your commitment to the review, and we will be very, very happy that if you leave this as a legacy for the working people of Ghana. Another measure that government can take to effectively protect incomes.
But President Akufo-Addo says his government will not act in any way to shortchange workers in protecting their pensions. He was responding to organized labor following various agitations on that front. General concerns were raised about the effect the domestic debt exchange will have on pension funds. But speaking in the Upper East Regional Capital, Bolgatanga, President Akufo-Addo says his government will not do anything to jeopardize the future of Workers' Pensions Fund.
In spite of the difficulties, the difficult challenges government employers face, this was made possible through consensus building to ensure businesses attain high levels of employment to hasten economic recovery. This is no mean feat, as it is the first time in the history of the determination of the national daily minimum wage that the parties agreed to the payment of COLA after wage adjustment for the year has already been agreed. This is an indication of our collective resolve to protect workers and their standards of living. We would also recall that this year began with government and organized labor concluding negotiations on the 2023 base pay and pay point relativity for public sector workers in January 2023. Following a series of consultations and consensus building within the Public Services Joint Standing Negotiating Committee, the base pay on the single spine salary structure was increased by 30% over the 2022 figure, effective 1st January 2023. Indeed, the 30% increment of the 2023 base pay is the highest since the introduction of the single spine salary structure in 2010. Government which is committed to improving the lot of workers and their dependents. In the wake of the current global economic crisis, it has become even more imperative to protect workers. Our collective responsibility in achieving this objective is important, and it is for this reason that I consider the theme for today's celebration, protecting incomes and pensions in an era of economic crisis, our responsibility, as most appropriate. Secretary General, organized labor, it is evident that this current global crisis is the worst crisis the world has experienced in the past 50 years. In spite of the damaging effect of the crisis, we've managed to protect lives, livelihoods, and jobs, and kept the lights on. The crisis is having a profound impact on national economies and societies. Incomes, pensions, and investment funds are equally being affected.
Our labor expert Austin Game is urging the government to consider including workers in matters relating to their welfare. He's warning labor will be tough on politicians and demanding fair treatment on the labor front in the upcoming elections.
Pay increase cannot be done in vacuum. I agree that inflation has always been a concern, a bane for working people and the general public. We do not even have to wait for only inflation. There are several ways that it affects, like changes in our taxes, and many other things can definitely make us suffer loss of income. So when you get to the table, what are the things that can be considered? First and foremost, it's about the business itself. My friend, the Secretary General, talks about sustainability and protection of jobs. Yes, that is the paramount thing to do. If we can protect the jobs, it will come from how we produce and how we market and the income we generate as the people to enable us to distribute, or if you like, disburse. So clearly, I am in agreement, save that inflation must be handled from a different angle. That's why we set up in the law a National Tripartite Committee that can look at all those parameters, if it will mean talking about it in a more, inclusive manner that would support government in office to tame the inflation, yes, it can be done, but not as a measure of increasing pay. Pay is increased by productivity and other variables. And that's my beef about that aspect of it.
Well, all right, go ahead, Mr.
No, go ahead.
In all of these, I want us to talk about the pension funds of workers, which government is eyeing to include in the domestic debt exchange. The workers say it will worsen their plight. What avenues are available for workers to press home their request for government to exclude them?
Well, they are the owners of the money. I mean, this one is not negotiable. It's not a debatable issue. Maybe it's the capacity to handle it in a different way that matters. If I were in their shoes, this is not a matter for negotiation with a third party. It's our money. We have given it to you on certain conditions and terms. So don't include it in the IMF request. That's just about it. If there is something else that can be done, let's talk about it. Something else, too, because this is Ghana, we all dwell in it, and therefore, if there is any way that we can help without damaging our resources when we come on retirement, all the best for everybody.
Well, they say they will not accept an increase of salary and emoluments for Article 71 office holders. Their reason is simple. If government says its hands are tied in this economic crisis we find ourselves, then there's no need to increase salaries of those who are in charge of affairs. Your thoughts on this?
Well, there will have to be some appreciation of what is going on with Article 71 people. They are also workers. That's number one. I repeat, they are also workers. Save that they are titled political workers. That's just about it. And because they are workers, they could also join the same union for the union to negotiate for them. If they join them, they cannot say that they will not negotiate for them. I have led negotiations for the unions before. Organized labor has always had a representative on the committee that is to be set up under the Constitution of Ghana, and they review it. Indeed, pay has been increased for working people across the country by tradition and practices. Article 71 office holders, particularly members of parliament and ministers of state, they don't have their emolument changed just every year like they do for others. We wait till it's about time for the exit of a government, then a committee is hurriedly put up and they try to do something. And because of the back pay associated with whatever percentage that have been given, it is as though they have carried the whole Bank of Ghana into their homes. It is not correct. And therefore, we have to be measured in such demands. I'm saying so because Article 71 office holders are working people and they must be paid. And they can also decide to go and engage a consultant to lead them. Consultant like organized labor is a consulting organization. People affiliate it to lead them. And so saying that they should not. What maybe they are talking about is if Article 71 office holders are going to get the kind of ex-gratia they get, then that is the concern they are raising. Even that, it has to be discussed properly. Because we expect them to work, yes. Every 4 years, they have become class 1 people. You can be described, enable us take our destiny into our hands and not become slaves to IMF any longer. That I agree with the organized labor. No more. And so the 2024 election will not be held under the canopy of a traditional partisan myopic approach to we belong to this, we belong to that. No more. I will get into the trenches with you people. We'll talk about it extensively in a civilized way. No business of we are from this region and this region. I would lead a crusade. I would tell the people of the Volta region, of the people in Ashanti region, in the Central region, wherever, Let us be very, very open. No more traditional voting.
Well, brace yourselves for a hike in the prices of selected goods as the Excise Duty Amendment Act goes into effect today, as well as the Income Tax Amendment Act. These two taxes were passed by Parliament together with the Growth and Sustainability Act, despite fierce resistance by the minority in Parliament and industry. Parliamentary Affairs correspondent Kwekwa Sante has more.
The Excise Duty, Growth and Sustainability Levy and Income Tax Amendment Acts are going into effect today. The taxes were opposed by the minority in Parliament and industry players, but were passed anyway. In particular, the Excise Duty Amendment Act imposes a 20% tax on mineral water, non-alcoholic beer, energy drinks, fruit juices, and other non-alcoholic drinks. There will also be a 50% tax on spirits, including akweteshi, cigarettes, and e-smoking devices. The Income Tax Amendment Act provides that winnings from betting, lottery, and games of chances will also now be subject to a 10% withholding tax at the point of payout. Deputy Finance Minister Benosi Asare defended the tax measures.
What government is seeking to do is to make sure we put some percentage on sugary items, like the fruit juice that contains sugar. That is what government seeks to do here. So government is also looking at protecting the health of its citizens.
Minority leader Dr. Kisela Toforson, who led his group's opposition, said the taxes will worsen the plight of the ordinary Ghanaian. Meanwhile, Guta says it will pass on the cost to consumers.
The business that we do not do in isolation. We do with the consuming public. So whatever affects the business community, the rippling effect goes to the consumer.
These taxes have been touted as key to revitalizing the economy.
Well, let's get more on this. General Secretary of the Beverages Association joins us via Zoom for more. I'm grateful for your time. This certainly will affect the cost of business. Have you figured out how you're going to maneuver around these taxes?
Thank you very much, and good evening to your listeners. I think if you could remember, the last time we met at your studio, the PM Express, I told you the way government is going, if they are not careful, this country will go down. The history of this country, his administration is causing more mayhem by introducing policies, inflicting more hardship on the citizens. So this is where we have come to. If you look at the records of the taxes that were passed, all that we said was to ask government to hold on and let us engage. Because definitely this is going to add on costs to the consumer. And the very people that you seek to protect in business circles, investments should come in and all that, they are the same people and the same businesses that you are by introducing certain ad hoc measures and taxes that will affect these industries. And for industry, anytime government passes a tax, it's not the industry that is taxing, it's you, the individual. And therefore, we need to ask questions why government is doing this. Ahead of a lot of excuses that government has given, that product that contains sugary product, they are trying to protect the consumer. On what basis are they doing this? Because if there's anything that has to be done, it's the regulator, which is the FDA, that must come to us to say, this is why we need to do this. And it's not the increasing the cost that will solve the problem. Because anytime that you pass on the cost and you increase, we are going to also pass on the cost to the consumer. That is why we said so many taxes has been introduced, and most of them are not doing us any good. Some of them has made business go down the drain. And therefore, we need to review some of these taxes to ensure that business survives in this country. And if you are not employing and people have to find jobs on their own, then you need to introduce measures that will make them efficient enough to have their own businesses so that they don't put the burden on government. Unfortunately, this is not what we are seeing. So for them to introduce these three taxes, if you look at the concept of it, every company will bear a blunt of these taxes, as much as most of these breweries and big business industries players are going to implement all these taxes at the same time. And therefore, it's not something that affects one, and therefore the other certain taxes will also be affected. Everyone comes into play. And therefore, if you look at it, we are going to put in place all these taxes that has been introduced, the 2.5 of the Growth and Sustainability Bill, the income tax level, which has also been raised for people that are taking 500 this time, you are going to pay taxes on that because the bar has been raised. And therefore, if you do that, it's the employer who is going to find money. Also make sure that the employer's salary do not go down the limit that they have set. And therefore, if you look at government's own limits that they have set, it's 480 Ghana for an employee. And who survives on that? That is why we are saying that this is not the time, because the measures that you are introducing, the very food that we eat and consume are the ones that you are taxing. And this is not something that you need to do as a government. Therefore, meet these industry players and let us discuss. Perhaps there might be other ways that we can find the increment that you want, or maybe there will be no increment at all. And therefore, we need to consider all these measures that you have already put.
I'm grateful for your time. Mr. Samuel Agri, he's General Secretary of the Beverages Association. Certainly, as you heard him say, the consumer will be feeling the impact of these new taxes because the cost will be passed on to them. But how much and how many more of these taxes can they bear? Executive Director of the Consumer Protection Agency, Kofi Kapito, is worried about the turnout of events. He spoke on the AM show.
What I'm saying is, look, we live in a country, right, where government goes and borrows money from international markets. And the government brings it back instead of putting it into a better use for the money to generate returns so that they can pay the monies that they borrow back. We put it in the social interventions, places that we cannot even collect or make revenue out of it. Look, what I'm saying is the consumer in Ghana today, it is at a stand that is very, very critical because we are being pushed all aspects. And if you push anybody against the wall and they hit the wall, they won't have anywhere to go but to come back at you. My issue is government should be responsible. That's the reason why we vote for a government. I don't expect government to make mistakes where it is clear that 90% of Ghanaians, apart from the government and his appointees, don't see that time has come for government to cut down on its expenditure. In any civilized economy, the first thing government does is to look at themselves and say, look, let me cut down first so that the rest of the people will support me. I'll give you an example. Look, in the United Kingdom, it got to a time that they wanted to increase the salaries of the Prime Minister and parliamentarians. Independent body is the one that reviews that salary arrangements. At that time, Parliament has passed the law to cut down on social amenities for the people of the United Kingdom. The independent body said that it is not going to increase salaries for the Prime Minister and his appointees. In Ghana, rather, they increase their salaries. Okay, they don't stop flying business class, buying Land Cruisers, living in government bungalows rent-free, electricity-free, water-free. So the question is, how do you pay the money back? And then you tell me the consumer who hasn't done anything. Look, now people's investment has been touched. Other things that were benefiting Ghanaians, we don't even have it anymore. But the government is afraid. And that's why I say that the government of Ghana, including the local governments, are very, 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 very much afraid because maybe they own the properties. Why can't we say we are going to do proper property valuation and tax properties well? In a country that properties are being sold, $5 million, $2 million, $1 million, $500,000, and the property rates on them is not even equivalent to even 1% of the value of the property.
We're still live on Joy News Prime. We're coming to you from our studios in Kokomlemle on DTT because we're free to air on Go TV channel 144 and DSTV channel 421. We'll take a break. When we return, there's more in business.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to Prime Business with me, Pius Kojo Baka. President Akufo-Addo has given the firm guarantee of Ghana securing financing assurance from the Paris Club at its next meeting. Well, this, the president says, could be crucial in helping Ghana secure an IMF board approval. Speaking at the parade to mark Workers' Day in Bolgatanga in the Upper East region earlier today, the president expressed optimism that the IMF program will help Ghana fast-track the recovery of the economy.
The Bank of Ghana and the regulators in the financial sector space have provided some regulatory reliefs to support affected institutions. In keeping with our common objective, government through the Financial Stability Council will monitor continuously the impact of the domestic debt exchange program on financial institutions to enable it to take remedial action if and when necessary. This will ensure that measures put in place to safeguard incomes, deposits, pensions, investor funds, and assets are effective. After achieving a staff-level agreement with the IMF in December 2022 in record time, 6 months after beginning the negotiations in July 2022, we've continued to work tirelessly to complete all prior actions required to present Ghana's program to the IMF Executive Board for approval. We've also made substantial progress on the debt exchange program, as well as on our engagements with bilateral creditors to secure financing assurance required for the IMF program. We are assured that the next round of meetings of the Paris Club will result in the formation of an official creditor committee, inclusive of China, and the provision of financing assurances. The IMF and the World Bank have been very supportive in this journey. With the progress made so far, we expect the IMF board to consider Ghana's program for imminent approval after the financing assurances are provided.
But speaking of the same program, the Trade Union Congress registered its opposition to the IMF program, insisting it is not the answer to current challenges facing the economy. Dr. Yauban is Secretary General of the Trade Union Congress.
COVID-19 and the war in Ukraine have only exposed the weakness of our economy and the economic policy framework that has guided economic management in Ghana in the last 40 years. The reason Ghana has had to seek IMF support almost every 3 years is largely due to the flaws in the way our economy has been managed based on the neoliberal free market ideology. We would like to reiterate our well-known position that the IMF program can never take us out of this crisis. Our history of engagements with the IMF provides ample evidence that IMF-sponsored programs and policies cannot change our economic circumstances. Another IMF program will only impose more economic burden on us. We have to change the situation ourselves as Ghanaians. We believe strongly that government can lead us out of this crisis. And the government can do so by cutting expenditure on non-essentials, including the need to stop spending our hard-earned revenue on a national cathedral. In fact, comrades, it will be better to convert the project into a national hospital.
And that's it for Prime Business. I am Pius Kojo Baka. Sports is next.
It's time now for sports in the Ghana Premier League. League leaders, Adriana Stars, were held to 1-1 draw against Kotoko Royals at the Deus Stadium. Isaac Minta opened the scoring in the 70th minute before Prince Kwame netted the equalizer.
Chances upon chances, opportunities being created at both ends of the field. Oh, that's a goal! Against the run of play, and it's Minta who registers the first goal for Ibiana. I thought that the ball was going out of play. Goalkeeper was completely beaten and stranded. Drilled in nicely. Oh, they're back in the game. They are back in the game. Prince Kwame Doge. He's been probing, he's been threatening. And eventually, it's 1 goal apiece. Let's take a look at it again. He had to drill that in. And it looks like it took a ricochet of one of the players.
And to the reactions of the two clubs, Adriana head coach Parkway say Fabing was not happy with officiating, while his opponent John Ejiafo was satisfied with the point. And that'll be it for sports this evening. And before we go, management of the Tamale Teaching Hospital is locked in a meeting to find perpetrators of an alleged physical abuse of 3 persons, including a freshly delivered mother. Although video footages of the incident, which occurred earlier today, captured an altercation between a security man and a patient at the hospital, public relations officer of the Tamale Teaching Hospital, Aliu Zubairu, says management is conducting more investigations into the matter.
We've just been informed that there was an disagreement that ensued between our security and that of a patient relative. It has to do with the security insisting for the relative not to enter, if you like, the facility through where he was. And so that has come to our notice.
Certainly, this is abuse of patients. What steps are you taking? And in fact, what have you done to actually compensate this victim and also ensure it never happens in the hospital again?
If you listen to me properly, Aisha, I said we have been informed of that situation between the security and a patient relative, not a patient.
Okay, so relative of a patient. It still doesn't make it right, correct?
So be it as it is, management has swiftly moved in. We are in a meeting at the moment, and we're looking at what really transpired. And then beyond that, we definitely will want to have an investigative report. And if it comes out that the security did something wrong, definitely every punishment legally will be given to the person. So that is what we are doing at the moment.
But preliminary, what have you gathered as to what transpired? Have you been able to speak with at least people around as you also engage, you are engaged in this meeting?
Yes, so not to, let's say, preempt what may come out. For now, we just have the information that something like this event happened between the security and like I mentioned, the security, there is a system where a patient or patient relatives access the facility. And so the security will naturally prevent people who are not, let's say, allowed to go there, especially if it's not the time for relatives to visit the facility. Yes, so it is my understanding for now that the relative came there when it was not time for them to visit. And so the security insisted that she wait. And so within that space, that argument actually ensued between the two parties.
And that's how we wrap up the bulletin tonight. My name is Ayisha Ibrahim. Many thanks for watching. Log on to myjournalive.com. There's more of the news and updates of all the developing stories. Do enjoy the rest of our programs.